Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. I used to believe that love was about sacrifice, about putting your family first, about being the foundation that holds everything together. That belief kept me going for years. I thought if I worked harder, if I provided enough, if I supported Stephanie in every way possible, things would get better. I was wrong. The little jabs started early in our marriage, disguised as teasing. "Oh, Eric's making dinner tonight. Let's hope the kitchen doesn't burn down." She'd say it in front of friends, her laughter bright, effortless. They'd chuckle, throwing me sympathetic glances, not realizing that this was routine. The subtle digs, the offhand comments meant to remind everyone, including me, that I was less ambitious, less important, less a man. At first, I laughed along. You do that when you love someone. You assume they don't mean it, that it's just their way of joking. But over time, it got worse. She'd correct me in front of guests, rolling her eyes when I said something she didn't agree with. "No, honey, that's not how it happened. You always get the details wrong." I'd smile, pretending it didn't sting, pretending it didn't make me feel invisible. I took care of her home, handled everything so she could focus on her career. I made sure dinner was on the table, the bills were paid, our son had everything he needed. But none of it mattered. I wasn't enough. The breaking point came at a family gathering. Her parents had invited us over, and as usual, Stephanie took center stage, telling stories, laughing, basking in attention. I stayed quiet, sipping my drink, playing my role. Then someone brought up careers. "Eric, do you ever regret not doing something real with your life?" Stephanie's mother asked, her voice dripping with polite condescension. Before I could answer, Stephanie laughed. "Oh, trust me, if he ever had ambition, I'd be the first to know. But hey, at least he makes a great house husband." Laughter rippled around the table. I felt it like a punch to the gut. I looked at her, expecting some sign that she was joking, that she realized how cruel that was. But she just sipped her wine, completely unaware, or worse, completely indifferent to the way my stomach clenched. I had two choices: stay silent, let it pass like every other time, or finally say something. I set my glass down. "Funny," I said, my voice steady, "because from where I'm sitting, I'm the only one keeping this family from falling apart." Silence. Stephanie's smile froze. Her parents shifted awkwardly. Her brother cleared his throat. No one laughed this time. I let the moment hang in the air, then stood up, excusing myself from the table. I didn't wait for her to follow. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one chasing her. And that's when I knew something had to change. I woke up the next morning expecting some sort of fallout from the dinner at Stephanie's parents' house. But instead, there was nothing. No cold shoulder, no sarcastic remarks, no passive-aggressive sighs. It was like the entire night had been erased from her memory. And that, somehow, was worse. I watched her move around the kitchen, scrolling through her phone while sipping coffee, completely unfazed. I wanted her to say something, to acknowledge that I had stood up for myself, that I had finally pushed back. But she just tapped away at her screen, humming to herself. "Morning," I said. She barely glanced up. "Morning." That was it. That was all she gave me. I forced myself to eat my breakfast, but the food tasted like nothing. I had spent half the night replaying what happened, expecting an argument, a confrontation, anything that would prove she cared. But she didn't. I was just a fixture in her life, a background character, someone she didn't even bother fighting with. Later that evening, we met up with a group of close friends for drinks. I wasn't in the mood to go, but Stephanie insisted. "You need to get out more," she said as she fixed her hair in the mirror. "Maybe then you'll stop taking things so seriously." I knew what that meant. Stop making me look bad. At the bar, the conversation flowed, the drinks loosened everyone's tongues, and, as always, Stephanie took the lead. She had a way of commanding attention, making herself the center of every story. At first, I just let it happen the way I always did. But then the conversation turned toward relationships, and before I could stop it, Stephanie found her opening. "You know what's funny?" she said, twirling the stem of her wine glass between her fingers. "Eric once told me he wanted to start his own business. Can you imagine? Him running something?" The table laughed. My stomach clenched. Come on. One of her friends chuckled. What kind of business? Stephanie smirked. Oh, I don't know. Something safe, something that wouldn't actually require risk. Maybe a cozy little bookstore? A coffee shop? Something cute where he could fold napkins and chat with customers. More laughter. I gripped my drink, my jaw tightening. Oh, don't be mad, babe, she cooed, placing a hand on my arm. You know I love that about you. You're just comfortable. Comfortable. The word stung more than I expected. I had spent years sacrificing for this marriage. I had put her first, made sure she had everything she needed, supported her every ambition. And yet, here she was belittling me in front of our friends like I was some joke. I set my glass down with more force than necessary. You know what, Stephanie? My voice was calm, but it cut through the noise like a blade. You should be thanking me. The laughter died instantly. Stephanie's eyes widened slightly. Excuse me. I leaned forward, my voice still steady. For everything I do, while you're out here acting like I'm some aimless fool, I'm the one keeping our lives together. I handle the house, the bills, our kids' schedule. I make sure your life runs smoothly, so you can sit here and act like you're above it all. Silence. Stephanie blinked, completely caught off guard. This wasn't how the script was supposed to go. I wasn't supposed to push back. Her friends glanced at each other, uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. Finally, she let out a breathy laugh, shaking her head. Oh, come on, babe. Don't be so dramatic. We're just joking. I exhaled slowly, pushing my chair back. Yeah, a joke. That's exactly what this is. I grabbed my jacket and stood up. Where are you going? She asked, her tone still light, but there was an edge of something else beneath it now. I looked at her, really looked at her. I don't know, I said, but I think I need to figure that out. And with that, I walked out of the bar, for the first time choosing myself over her. The night I walked out of that bar, something inside me changed. For the first time in years, I stopped making excuses for Stephanie. Stopped convincing myself that things would get better if I just tried harder. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I drove around for hours, letting the city lights blur past me, my thoughts racing. Every memory of Stephanie's insults, her condescending laughter, the way she always made me feel small, it all clicked into place like pieces of a puzzle I had refused to see. By the time I finally walked through the front door, she was already asleep. Or, at least, she was pretending to be. I could tell by the way her breathing wasn't quite right, the way she lay too still. She didn't want to talk about what happened. She wanted it to disappear. But I wasn't letting anything go. The next morning, the house was eerily quiet. Stephanie was in the kitchen, sipping coffee, scrolling on her phone like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't walked out on her in front of our friends. Morning, she said, not even looking up. I grabbed a cup from the cabinet, pouring my own coffee. Morning. Nothing more. No apology. No acknowledgement of last night. Just another reset, like always. But I wasn't playing along anymore. Later that afternoon, while Stephanie was out, I decided to clean the house. Not because I needed to, but because I needed to clear my head. Cleaning had always helped me think, helped me process. I started in the bedroom, sorting through old drawers, tossing out things we no longer needed. The more I worked, the more I realized just how much of myself I had buried in this house. Everything was hers, her decor, her choice of furniture, her rules. Where was I in any of this? Then, as I was rearranging the closet, I noticed something. A small, navy blue gift box tucked behind a row of shoes. I frowned, reaching for it. It was heavy, the kind of box that held something expensive. Curious, I lifted the lid. Inside was a men's watch. Sleek, modern, very expensive. I felt my stomach drop. I didn't own a watch like this. Slowly, I turned it over. And there, on the back, was an engraving. For the man who makes my heart race. My grip tightened around the box. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. This wasn't for me. I knew it the second I saw it. Stephanie would never say something like that to me. A sickening realization settled in my chest. She wasn't just cruel. She wasn't just emotionally abusive. She was cheating. I sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at the watch, my mind reeling. How long had this been going on? Was it just one man? Was it someone I knew? Suddenly, everything made sense. Her distance, her constant criticisms, the way she pushed me down to justify what she was doing behind my back. I thought I would feel rage. Thought I would explode, demand answers, throw the watch in her face. But instead, a terrifying calm settled over me. Confronting her now would be pointless. She'd lie. She'd spin it. She made me look crazy. No. If I was going to take her down, I needed proof. I carefully placed the watch back in its box and returned it to its hiding spot. Then, I left the room, my pulse steady, my mind already forming a plan. Stephanie had spent years controlling the story. But now, I was about to rewrite the ending. I spent the rest of the day going through the motions, pretending everything was normal. Stephanie had no idea that I knew. She went about her routine, scrolling on her phone, tossing off casual remarks, acting like she hadn't just shattered our marriage behind my back. But I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was focused. That night, as she showered, I sat on the couch, staring at the closed bedroom door, my mind racing. Confronting her now would do nothing. She'd deny it, gaslight me, turn the blame on me. No, I needed more. I needed to catch her so completely, so undeniably, that she wouldn't be able to wriggle her way out of it. So I did something I never thought I would do. I grabbed my laptop, logged into our shared phone account, and pulled up her call records. At first, nothing stood out. Her usual calls to her friends, her parents, the occasional work call. But then I saw it. A repeated number. Over and over again. It wasn't saved under a name. Just a string of digits. And the calls always happened at the same times. Late at night, early in the morning, when she thought I wouldn't notice. I pulled out my phone and typed the number into a search engine. And just like that, a name popped up. Matthew. I clenched my jaw. Matthew. The longtime family friend. The guy who had always been a little too charming, a little too attentive to Stephanie. The man I had never suspected until now. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. It was him. A few months ago, Stephanie had convinced me to book a couple's cruise. She had gushed about how much we needed it, how it would bring us closer, how it was exactly what our marriage needed. But now I saw the truth. She had planned it all. Not for us. For them. I rubbed my temples, feeling the weight of it all. But instead of breaking, I smiled. Fine. She wanted to play games? I'd play too. The next morning, Stephanie acted like everything was perfect. She kissed my cheek before heading out, telling me she was meeting a friend for brunch. I nodded, smiling. Have fun. She smiled back, completely unaware that I had already started dismantling her world. The second she was gone, I went back to work. First, I called the cruise line and upgraded our cabin to a suite, one with hidden security cameras in the main area. They were marketed for personal safety, but I had a different use in mind. Then I installed a small GPS tracker on her car. It was discreet, barely noticeable. I didn't need to watch her every move. I just needed to know where she went when she thought I wasn't looking. And finally, I went back to her closet. I carefully took the watch she had bought from Matthew and swapped it with a cheap knockoff. Same color, same style, but completely worthless. She'd never know until she handed it to him. And when she did, that's when things would start falling apart. A few days later, I got my first real confirmation. The GPS tracker showed that Stephanie wasn't going to yoga or brunch like she claimed. She was meeting him. I watched as the tracker led her to a small hotel on the other side of town. My pulse remained steady. I had expected this. But now, I had proof. I took a screenshot of the location, saving it. Then, I closed my phone and leaned back in my chair. Stephanie had no idea. She still thought I was the clueless husband, the man who let her walk all over him. She had no idea that I was planning something bigger than she could ever imagine. The cruise was coming up in a week, and when it did, her entire life would sink. The night before the cruise, Stephanie was glowing. She moved around the house, humming to herself, a smug little smile on her lips as she packed her suitcase. I watched her from the doorway, arms crossed, memorizing every detail. She thought she had won. You sure you packed everything? I asked, keeping my tone light. She glanced at me over her shoulder, tossing in another dress. Of course. You know I'm always prepared. That much was true. Stephanie never left anything to chance. Except this time, she had underestimated me. She zipped up her suitcase and walked over, wrapping her arms around my neck. This trip is going to be amazing for us, she said softly. I forced myself to smile. Yeah, I think so too. She kissed me, slow and sweet, the way she used to when she actually cared. For a second, I almost believed her. But then I remembered the GPS logs, the late-night calls, the secret hotel meetups. I let her pull away, watching as she turned back to her packing. I had everything I needed, and in less than 24 hours, she'd realized just how prepared I was too. The cruise ship was massive, a floating city filled with couples, families, and honeymooners. Stephanie held my hand as we boarded, her grip firm, leading me along like she was the one in control. I played along. For now, once we got to our suite, she barely took a moment to admire the luxury upgrade before excusing herself. "I'm going to check out the spa," she said, slipping on her sunglasses. I nodded. "Go ahead. I think I'll explore the deck." She smiled. "Perfect. I'll meet you for dinner later." And just like that, she was gone. I pulled out my phone and checked the hidden cameras I had installed in the suite. Clear. I checked the GPS tracker I had attached to her purse before we left, moving toward the opposite end of the ship, towards his cabin. I exhaled slowly, setting my phone down. Showtime. That night at dinner, Stephanie was radiant. She laughed easily, sipped her wine slowly, and made conversation with the couple seated at our table like she didn't have a care in the world. I watched her carefully, noting the way she barely touched her food, the way her phone stayed close to her hand. She was waiting, and then I gave her what she needed. "I think I'll head up early," I said, setting my napkin down. "I am exhausted." Stephanie didn't argue. She smiled, touching my arm. "Of course, babe. Get some rest." I stood up, kissed the top of her head, and walked away. I didn't go to our room. I went to his. The hallway was quiet as I stood outside the cabin door, my heart steady, my breathing controlled. I already knew what was happening inside. I had waited long enough. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the footage from our suite, and hit record. Then I knocked. Silence. Then movement. Footsteps. A hesitant voice. "Who is it?" I smiled. "Room service." A pause. Then, slowly, the door opened. Matthew stood there, shirtless, confusion on his face. And just beyond him, Stephanie, wrapped in a robe, eyes wide with panic. I lifted my phone, showing them the live recording. "Smile," I said. "You're on camera." Stephanie's face drained of color. Matthew stepped back, rubbing his face. "Eric, man." I ignored him. "How long, Stephanie?" My voice was calm, steady. "How long have you been sneaking around?" She swallowed hard, shaking her head. "It's not what it looks like." I laughed. Really laughed. "Oh, come on. You can do better than that." She tried again. I cut her off. "I have every call, every text, every location. I even swapped out that watch you got from Matthew. Hope you weren't expecting him to be impressed." Matthew shifted uncomfortably. "What?" Stephanie shot me a glare, but there was something else in her eyes now. Fear. I pocketed my phone. "Enjoy the rest of your night," I said, turning away. Stephanie grabbed my arm. "Eric, wait." I pulled away, meeting her eyes. For the first time in years, she had no power over me. "You should worry less about me," I said quietly, "and more about how you're getting off this ship." And with that, I walked away. The next part of my plan was already in motion, and by morning, she'd have nothing left. I didn't go back to our suite. Instead, I walked to the upper deck, leaning against the railing as the waves stretched endlessly into the night. The ocean was calm, steady, the opposite of what was coming for Stephanie. I scrolled through my phone, rewatching the footage I had just taken. Stephanie, caught red-handed. Matthew, frozen in place like a deer in headlights. Every moment was captured in high definition. Undeniable proof. I took a slow breath. I had waited for this moment, planned for it, built up to it, but now that it was here, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Not just because I had caught her, but because I was finally free. For years, I had been shackled to this marriage, to the idea that if I just worked harder, if I just gave more, maybe she would see me. Maybe I would be enough. But now I realized the truth. Stephanie's cruelty, her insults, her constant belittling, none of it was about me. It was about her. Her selfishness, her lack of loyalty, her need for control. And now, she had lost control completely. I returned to the suite just before dawn. Stephanie wasn't there. Good. I wasn't interested in hearing her excuses. I packed my bag, moving efficiently. Everything of mine went into the suitcase. Everything of hers stayed exactly where it was. Then, I grabbed her passport. She wasn't getting off this ship easily. I placed it in my pocket, along with her credit cards. By the time she realized they were missing, I'd already be long gone. I didn't see her until breakfast. I was sitting at a table near the window, enjoying my coffee, when I spotted her across the room. She looked like a wreck. Her hair was tangled, her eyes puffy from either lack of sleep or sheer panic. She had been looking for me. I took another sip of my coffee as she scanned the room. The second her eyes met mine, she froze. Then, quickly, she made her way over. "Eric," she said, her voice low but urgent. "We need to talk." I set my cup down, feigning surprise. "Do we?" She swallowed, glancing around. "Not here." "Oh, I think here is just fine," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Unless, of course, you'd rather have this conversation in front of everyone." Her face twisted. She knew I had the upper hand. She pulled out the chair across from me, sitting down, her hands clenched in her lap. "Eric," I held up a finger. "Before you start, let's be clear. I don't want to hear your excuses. I don't care about your apologies. I don't care what lies you want to spin." She exhaled sharply. "I wasn't going to lie." I raised an eyebrow. "Weren't you?" She bit her lip, shifting in her seat. "Look, I made a mistake," I laughed. "A mistake. As if this was some accident. A mistake is spilling coffee or forgetting a birthday." I leaned forward, my voice cold. "You planned this. You arranged for Matthew to be on this ship. You used our marriage as a cover for your little vacation affair." Her face burned red. "It wasn't like that." I pulled out my phone, tapping the screen. The footage. Stephanie, stepping out of Matthew's cabin, wrapped in a robe, caught in 4K. I turned the phone toward her. "Then tell me," I said, my voice calm. "What was it like?" She paled. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I tilted my head. "That's what I thought." She swallowed, her fingers twitching. "Eric, please. Let's just go home and talk about this. We can fix it." I chuckled. "Fix it?" "Oh, sweetheart," I said, shaking my head. "You really don't get it, do you?" I reached into my pocket, pulled out her passport, and placed it on the table between us. She stared. Her hands shook as she reached for it, but I placed my palm over it, stopping her. "I canceled your credit cards," I said evenly. "You have no money, no way off this ship, and when we dock tomorrow—" I leaned in, dropping my voice. "I won't be there waiting for you." Her eyes went wide. You can't do this." I smirked. "I already did." She grabbed my arm, desperation flashing across her face. "Eric, listen to me." I pulled away, standing up. "No, Stephanie. You listen." I picked up her passport, tucked it into my pocket, and smiled down at her. This is what consequences feel like." Then, without another word, I walked away, leaving her sitting there, shaken, helpless, alone. When the cruise docked, I walked off that ship a free man. The sun was just rising over the port, casting long shadows over the bustling crowd of passengers retrieving their luggage. I inhaled deeply, feeling lighter than I had in years. Behind me, Stephanie was still scrambling to figure out how she was getting off the ship with no passport, no credit cards, and no one left to manipulate. I didn't look back. I had arranged everything before we even left for this trip. A car was waiting for me at the dock, the driver already loading my luggage as I slid into the back seat. I pulled out my phone and made the call I had been waiting for. "It's time," I said simply. On the other end, my lawyer chuckled. "I figured as much. I've got everything ready." I leaned back against the seat, watching the ocean disappear as we drove toward the airport. "File the divorce papers today, and make sure she gets served immediately." "Done." I ended the call and exhaled slowly. This was just the beginning. The next 2 weeks were a storm. Stephanie came home to an eviction notice. I had already removed her name from the lease. She called me in a panic, her voice frantic on the voicemail she left because I never picked up. "Eric, what the hell is going on? I just got home and all my stuff is in boxes. You can't just throw me out." Yes, I could, and I did. She had cheated in our home, disrespected our marriage, and now she had no home to come back to. I transferred our shared savings into my personal account. Every penny I had earned was now out of her reach. The only thing left was a single joint checking account with just enough money to cover her first month's rent somewhere far beneath her usual lifestyle. She went from living comfortably in a high-end apartment to crashing on a friend's couch. And if she was hoping for sympathy from Matthew, she was out of luck. He wasn't returning her calls either. Everything was unraveling. 2 weeks after I had her served, we had our first legal meeting. She walked into the law office looking wrecked. Her usual perfect makeup was barely there. Her designer handbag looked out of place now that she had no money to fill it with. She sat across from me in the conference room, her lawyer at her side. Mine was beside me, flipping through a thick folder of evidence. She cleared her throat, attempting to regain some composure. "Eric, can we just talk? Without all of this." She gestured to the lawyers. I smiled. "We are talking, Stephanie. This is just how it works now." She clenched her jaw. "We don't have to make this ugly." I leaned forward slightly. "Oh, I agree. Which is why I have a very simple proposal. You walk away with nothing. No alimony, no assets, no part of my retirement, nothing. You sign the papers and we're done." Her lawyer scoffed. "That's ridiculous." Stephanie shook her head, forcing a laugh. "Eric, come on. Be reasonable." I slid a USB drive across the table. "This is a copy of the footage from a cruise. I also have hotel records, call logs, and credit card statements showing your little affair." I nodded toward my lawyer, who added, "If this goes to court, you'll not only walk away with nothing, but you'll be publicly exposed for adultery. That means no spousal support, no negotiations." Stephanie's face turned pale. She knew she had nothing to fight with. I sat back, waiting. She swallowed, her hands shaking as she grabbed a pen and signed the papers. And just like that, it was over. I walked out of that law office feeling weightless. Years of gaslighting, manipulation, and emotional abuse, all of it was behind me. I had come into this marriage thinking I had found a partner. Instead, I had been used. But now, I was free. Stephanie tried calling me that night. The call went to voicemail. "Eric, I don't even know what to say. I never thought it would end like this. I hope one day you can forgive me." I deleted the message because I didn't need an apology. I had one. The first morning after the divorce was finalized, I woke up to silence. Not the heavy, suffocating kind I had grown used to in my marriage, but the peaceful kind. The kind that didn't come with tension hanging in the air. The kind that didn't make me feel like I was walking on eggshells. I stretched in my new apartment, a modest but comfortable place I had picked out for myself. No longer trapped in the space that had once been ours. No longer surrounded by memories tainted by betrayal. This place was mine, just mine. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat on the balcony, and just breathed. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the next insult, the next fight, the next moment where I had to defend myself against the woman who was supposed to love me. That life was over. And now, I was finally living for myself. The first thing I did was rebuild my career. For years, I had sacrificed my ambitions, letting Stephanie shine while I played the role of supportive husband. That ended now. I reached out to old connections, dusted off ideas I had put on the shelf for too long, and within a few months, I had started my own consulting business. It wasn't easy. There were long nights, stressful days, moments where doubt crept in. But every time I felt that old voice whispering, telling me I wasn't good enough, I reminded myself who put it there in the first place. Stephanie had spent years making me feel small. But now, I was building something bigger than she ever could have imagined. And the best part? I did it without her. As time passed, I started reconnecting with people. Friends I had lost touch with. Family members I had drifted from. At first, it was strange. I had spent so long feeling isolated in my marriage, used to making excuses for why Stephanie and I couldn't come to gatherings, why we always seemed too busy to see anyone. The truth was, she had never wanted me to have a life outside of her. Now, I had dinner with my brother every Sunday. I grabbed drinks with old college friends on Friday nights. I even joined a local gym, something Stephanie had always mocked me for even considering. Every step I took away from her, I felt lighter. I had spent so long being someone else's shadow. Now I was finally my own person again. One evening, about 6 months after the divorce, I was sitting at a coffee shop, finishing up some work. It had become my new routine, wrapping up projects while sipping on a cup of something warm, enjoying the simple pleasure of being alone without feeling lonely. That's when I heard a familiar voice. Eric. I looked up, and there she was, Stephanie. She looked different, not in a bad way, but in a way that told me she wasn't doing as well as she had expected. Her designer clothes were swapped for something simpler. Her usual, perfectly manicured nails were bare. And for the first time in as long as I had known her, she looked hesitant. I set my coffee down. Stephanie. She shifted on her feet. I didn't expect to see you here. I shrugged. I live nearby. She nodded, biting her lip. You look good. I smiled slightly. I feel good. Something flickered across her face. Regret. Maybe. I've been meaning to call, she said carefully. I didn't know if you want to hear from me. I tilted my head, considering. Why would I? She winced. Eric, I held up a hand. You don't have to say anything. I moved on. Her eyes searched mine, like she was trying to find the old version of me, the one who would have softened, the one who would have let her back in. But that man didn't exist anymore. She swallowed. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For the first time, I believed her. But it didn't change anything. I nodded. I hope you're doing okay, Stephanie. I really do. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say more, but instead, she just gave me a small, sad smile. Take care, Eric. You too. She walked away. And just like that, she became someone I used to know. I watched her disappear down the street, then turned back to my laptop. I had work to do, a new life to live, and I wasn't wasting another second looking back. Months passed, and with every day that went by, my life only got better. The weight of my past had finally lifted, and I had fully stepped into a future that was mine alone. My business was thriving. I had reconnected with old friends, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. But as for Stephanie, her downfall had only just begun. I hadn't sought revenge beyond what I had already done. I didn't need to. Life was taking care of it for me. I heard bits and pieces through mutual acquaintances, small updates that painted a very clear picture of what her life had become. Matthew, the man she had risked everything for, had cut her off within weeks of the divorce. The moment she no longer had the financial stability and comfortable lifestyle I had provided, he lost interest. She had gone from being the trophy wife of a stable, devoted husband to just another burned-out affair that wasn't worth the effort. I didn't celebrate her misery, but I didn't feel sorry for her either. She had made her choices. Now, she had to live with them. One afternoon, I was grabbing lunch when I ran into an old friend, Dan, a guy I had lost touch with back when Stephanie had been controlling my entire social life. Man, Dan said, shaking his head as we caught up over burgers. I can't believe everything that went down with you and Stephanie. I smirked. You and me both. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. You hear what happened to her? I raised an eyebrow. Besides the obvious? Den chocolate. Oh, it gets worse. She tried dating some investment guy. Another high-status type, you know how she is, but it crashed and burned. Turns out, she's got a bit of a reputation now. I took a sip of my drink, amused. That's so. Yeah, he nodded. Apparently, word got around about the whole cruise fiasco. The video of you busting her in Matthew's cabin, that made the rounds. People in her circles know exactly what kind of person she is now. No one wants to take her seriously. I let out a low whistle. The internet never forgets. Stephanie had spent years carefully curating her image, playing the role of the sophisticated, put-together woman who had everything figured out. But now, people saw her for what she really was. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Not long after, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Stephanie, Eric, can we talk? I stared at the screen for a long moment. I hadn't heard from her since our run-in at the coffee shop. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity won. Me about what? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then again, she was hesitating. Finally, the message came through. Stephanie, I don't know. Things have been really hard. I made mistakes, I know that. But I didn't think my whole life would fall apart like this. I exhaled slowly. She still didn't get it. She still thought she was the victim. I let the silence stretch between us before finally replying. Me. Actions have consequences, Stephanie. That's not my problem anymore. A full minute passed. Then Stephanie, I know. I wish I could take it back. I didn't reply, because it didn't matter. The past was set in stone, and I had already moved on. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like, and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.